Hey guys, tonight we'll be gently exploring a series of hidden alien messages, strange whispers from across time and space that may hold truths not meant for waking minds, but for the quiet hours of sleep when the veil is thinnest and the mind can drift freely. So if this kind of content helps you relax, please subscribe, like the video, and leave your favourite alien theory in the comments. And now, let's settle in and begin with a soft, lingering mystery known as the whisper beyond the static, where in the early days of radio, long before we understood the depths of the cosmos, a few strange minds noticed something buried in the silence between transmissions, patterns too precise to be noise, too delicate to be chance, like faint knocking behind the curtain of chaos, and they listened, carefully, obsessively, cataloguing the warbles and pulses that came from no known source, describing rhythms like language, pulses like breath, as if the sky itself were humming in a code we didn't yet know how to read, and though dismissed as anomalies or interference, some couldn't let go of the idea that something, some distant intelligence, was speaking very, very slowly, on frequencies just outside our notice, and perhaps even adjusting its tone to match the gentle arc of Earth's orbit, as if watching us, waiting, or even trying to gently awaken something within us. And this theory grew quietly, whispered in observatories and late-night labs, that a deep-band radio pulse discovered in the 1920s, never fully explained, matched almost perfectly with another pulse recorded 40 years later, half a world away, as if the signal had made a loop or bounced from something massive, artificial, cold and deliberate. And though skeptics claimed atmospheric refraction or satellite interference, others wondered if it was something more ancient, something built to repeat across centuries, designed not for fast contact but slow unfolding, meant not to alarm us but to keep brushing gently against our awareness until we noticed, not with fear, but with a quiet inner stillness, like a dream you remember not in detail, but in feeling. And so this whisper became legend in some circles, never proven but too elegant to ignore, suggesting that alien intelligence might not announce itself with grand displays or sudden invasions, but with soft, persistent patterns that feel oddly personal, like a melody you don't know you know, or a phrase in a dream you wake up whispering. And perhaps these signals come not just from far away, but from far back, like echoes bouncing through space-time itself, always repeating, always there, and only audible when the mind is quiet, the light is low, and the static on the edge of consciousness is allowed to speak softly, slowly, as if it's been waiting for you, and only you, to listen. Our next theory is known as the language of the black stones, a quiet belief whispered among fringe historians and alien theorists who say that some ancient monoliths scattered across forgotten corners of the earth are not monuments of primitive worship or mere stones of ritual, but encoded artifacts left behind by something not of this world, dark, dense and humming with an energy too low to be measured by modern tools, yet unmistakably intentional when seen under moonlight or rain, when the wind moves across them like fingers brushing a harp. And this theory suggests that these stones speak, not in sound or symbols, but in angles, placements, magnetic pull, and impossible geometry that seems to realign compass needles and distort birdsong in the air nearby, almost as if reality bends slightly in their presence, like language meant not for ears, but for the very matter of the earth itself. And across continents, these black stones emerge with eerie consistency, obsidian slabs in Mesoamerica, basalt columns in northern Europe, jet-coloured boulders in Asia, aligned perfectly with the stars as they were thousands of years ago. And the strange thing is, they're never inscribed in any decipherable script, yet they seem positioned with purpose, each one connected by invisible lines, some even humming faintly when recorded in certain frequencies. And some believe these are not messages to be read, but messages to be felt, activated when human consciousness reaches a frequency low enough, calm enough to become a receiver, much like falling into a dream, where your awareness dips below the surface and becomes part of something wider, slower, older, and in that state, it said, the stones speak in the mind, not in words, but in impressions, images, and truths that arrive like deja vu or visions glimpsed between sleep and waking, and some who've sat beside these stones for days, fasting, listening, waiting, report hearing low pulses beneath their feet or sensing foreign thoughts gently brushing against their own. Thoughts not intrusive but patient, like a message that has been repeating for millennia, waiting for the right resonance in the human spirit. And the message, if it exists, is not a warning nor a threat, but a reminder. A reminder that long before we built cities or named the stars, something else left behind its presence here, not to rule us, but to plant a whisper buried in stone, geometry, and magnetic stillness, so that one day, when we slow down enough, quiet enough, soft enough, we might finally hear what the earth itself has been trying to tell us. Let's now explore a theory called dreams from the Orion line, a gentle and haunting idea that the stars in the Orion constellation, so familiar and constant in our night sky, may serve as an ancient transmission array, not just broadcasting messages in the language of light or gravity, but sending thoughts directly into the sleeping human mind, bypassing machines entirely, as if some distant intelligence has learned that dreams are softer gateways than technology, and perhaps even older than speech. And those who believe this theory suggest that, for as long as humans have dreamed, certain archetypes, tall beings of light, corridors of impossible geometry, ancient cities made of crystal or bone, have been recurring in dreamscapes across cultures and millennia, even among those who never knew the stars or spoke of other worlds. And it is said that these dreams arrive most often in those who sleep beneath open skies, travellers, wanderers, night watchers, those who fall asleep under the cold gaze of Orion's belt. And while science might attribute this to cultural patterning or coincidence, this theory proposes something far quieter, far more profound, that the stars themselves may be aligned not just in space, but in meaning, acting as transmitters of soft visions meant to awaken an ancient memory embedded within human consciousness, a memory not of Earth, but of elsewhere, of lives lived on other planes, other worlds, and in these dreams time feels stretched, as if minutes on Earth become hours in some celestial landscape where words are unspoken but understood, where knowledge flows not in logic but in pure understanding, and those who awaken from these dreams often feel a sadness they cannot name, as though they were just beginning to remember something they've spent lifetimes forgetting. And in some ancient traditions, Orion was not just a hunter, but a gateway, a celestial road the soul follows after death or before birth, a path lined with memory, light, and song. And this theory suggests that when we dream deeply enough, and when the angle of our sleep aligns just right beneath the belt of Orion, we become temporary receivers for a message broadcast not across light years, but across the fragile fabric of awareness itself, and that these dreams are not random, not illusion, but instruction, quiet guidance sent slowly, patiently, not to control but to comfort, to remind us that we are not alone, not isolated in flesh and soil, but connected to a vast web of minds who send their thoughts not in speech, but in dreams, because they know the human soul listens best in sleep, where the defences fall and the veil thins, and the truth can arrive not as noise, but as stillness, not as fear, but as a gentle whisper from the stars we've watched for all of time. This next idea is called the moon's quiet recording, a theory both simple and vast, suggesting that our moon, the silent cratered sentinel hanging above Earth in steady, unblinking stillness, has not merely been a natural satellite, but a passive recorder since the earliest days of our planet, absorbing and storing alien messages not through technology, but through presence, shadow, and frequency, like an ancient archive etched not in grooves or glyphs, but in mineral vibration and resonance. And some believe the moon's locked rotation, always showing the same face to Earth, is no accident, no cosmic coincidence, but a carefully placed mechanism designed to mirror and monitor, to stay in constant view of the life it watches, as if listening softly without interference. And the theory goes further, suggesting that in its thick crust, in its unnatural density, in its eerie ring when struck by impact, the moon may not be solid at all, but hollowed, its interior perhaps filled with crystalline structures, chambers that hum in response to the electromagnetic pulses of Earth, soaking in our signals, our transmissions, our thoughts, like a quiet listener waiting for the right moment to respond. And this idea isn't new. Echoes of it can be found in ancient myth, in stories of gods who placed the Un in the sky to measure time, to observe, to reflect. And those who walk the threshold between science and dream suggest that the moon may have arrived suddenly in Earth's history, appearing in the skies without a traceable formation event, and that this very arrival marked the beginning of a long, subtle transmission process, where alien intelligences, perhaps not bodies but frequencies, began using the moon not to speak to us directly, but to record, to store, to reflect back whispers of what we once were, and perhaps still are. And some claim that during certain lunar phases, especially eclipses, the moon amplifies these messages, beaming soft waves not in light but in thought, waves that affect sleep, mood, intuition, stirring half-formed memories in the subconscious, drawing up visions of ruins never visited, languages never learned. And when astronauts first landed and walked its surface, some say the moon reacted, not with violence or change, but with a subtle shift in resonance, as though the watcher had been touched by the watched, and now, in this theory, it continues to record, not for us, but for them, for those who seeded the early Earth, those who knew time in cycles not of centuries but of tides, and they placed the moon as a mirror, a memory, a message holder waiting in silence, gently echoing the music of Earth back into space where perhaps someone somewhere still listens, waiting for us to listen too. The next theory drifts beneath layers of cold and silence, known softly as the signal buried beneath Antarctica, a quiet but persistent idea that somewhere deep below the ancient frozen continent, beneath the miles-thick ice and forgotten fossils, there hums a message not made by nature, not carved by ice or time, but pulsing still with a frequency too stable, too exact to be explained by geology. And the theory begins with whispers from researchers and explorers who recorded low-frequency signals, sometimes rhythmic, sometimes patterned, that seemed to rise from the bedrock, not from tectonic shifts or glacial friction, but from a singular, unmoving point beneath the ice. A sound so deeply buried and constant that it behaved more like a broadcast than a natural vibration, and it was said to hum softly, almost like a heartbeat slowed to glacial time, repeating across decades, unchanged, unbroken, waiting beneath what many believe was once a lush, green land. And the theory suggests that long before Antarctica was frozen, long before the poles drifted and the climate shifted, something was placed there or landed there or awakened there, an object or device left by a race whose technology was not mechanical but harmonic, not digital but geological, designed to endure extinction-level changes without corrosion or decay, and the ice simply grew over it like a blanket of secrecy, hiding a message meant to be heard not by the ancient world but by us. Now, in the era of deep ice radar, when the hum can be detected, recorded, puzzled over but never fully translated, and some believe it speaks not in words but in tones, tones that reach into the subconscious, affecting dreams, moods, even weather patterns on a microscopic scale. And there are quiet stories, always soft and easily dismissed, of researchers who stayed too long in the field, who heard it not with equipment but in their own minds, waking with strange phrases on their tongues, phrases in no known language, yet somehow familiar, like echoes from a past that doesn't belong to Earth, and others be. Leave the signal is not meant to speak to us, but to wait for the return of its creators, or for a certain cosmic alignment that will trigger the next phase of its purpose. And perhaps it has been listening too, recording our presence, noting our curiosity, adjusting its pulse as we draw near, and so the theory remains, silent, cold, buried deep beneath the most inaccessible place on the planet, whispering a message older than our species, older than ice, a message not loud or urgent, but patient, as though it was placed there with the knowledge that all things return in time, and that someone, someday, would lean close enough to the ground, slow enough, still enough, to finally hear what the earth has been hiding in its frozen heart. This next idea is gently known as the crop circle lexicon, a theory not of pranks or patterns made by human hands, but of soft language carved in silence, left behind in fields of grain under moonlight, arranged in symbols too symmetrical, too fast and too intricate to be dismissed entirely as mischief. And while many believe these formations are human-made, others see in them something more. Something that pulses with an intelligence not concerned with spectacle, but with subtle communication through geometry, magnetism, and harmony. And they say the real message is not in the shape itself, but in the resonance, the way these flattened paths affect the soil beneath, bending stalks without breaking them, as though the message is being whispered through molecular memory, and some crop circles have been found to alter the electromagnetic field in their vicinity, causing compasses to spin and batteries to drain, as if something had visited and gently rewrote the energy of the land itself. And this theory holds that the circles form a language, one not based on grammar or sound, but on ratios, spirals, and recurring cosmic numbers like pi and d-phi, as if the authors of these symbols speak in the same tongue that formed galaxies and tree branches, a quiet code meant to be felt as much as read. And it is believed by some that these messages are not new, but part of a long, ongoing effort to nudge our consciousness awake, to remind us of a forgotten symbology embedded deep in human DNA, the same way ancient temples and natural forms seem to echo these same mathematical truths. And in this view, crop circles are not signs of arrival, but reminders, gentle nudges from a higher intelligence that exists not light years away, but just slightly out of sync with our awareness, capable of stepping through for only a moment to press a pattern into the earth, and then disappear like a breath before morning. And when seen from above, they are said to resemble constellations, frequency maps, even molecular structures, as if these symbols were seeded to connect the sky with the soil, the stars with the subconscious, and some believe the location of each formation is carefully chosen to correspond with ancient ley lines, energetic paths across the earth that may serve as receivers for celestial data, like slow, sleeping circuits waiting to light up. And those who walk within these circles sometimes report strange sensations, peaceful stillness, ringing in the ears, flashes of memory not their own, as if the geometry itself activates something within, something long dormant, like a key in a lock never noticed before. And so this theory continues quietly, year after year, each new circle arriving without fanfare, without noise, without proof, just silence and complexity left for those who are still enough, slow enough, to see that perhaps the earth is being softly written on by minds far older than our own, and that these fields are pages in a language meant not for eyes, but for something deeper, quieter, waiting within us all. Our next theory is one of the most intimate and haunting, lie elegant ideas whispered among alien theorists and bio-coded philosophers, known softly as the message in the DNA spiral, a suggestion that the very structure of life on Earth, those delicate, twisting helices carrying the instructions for every leaf, limb and eye, may contain more than biology, that it may hold a message left by creators not bound by time or gravity, but by a purpose far deeper than observation. And the theory begins with the strange mathematics of the double helix itself, how its turns and steps mirror the golden ratio, how its base pairs form precise repeating patterns that some say resemble coded sequences, and how, across species from the simplest bacteria to the vast orchestration of the human body, this structure persists as if chosen, not evolved, as if shaped by something that understood the poetry of physics and the elegance of symmetry. And those who listen closely to this theory believe that our DNA may act not just as a biological archive, but as a message capsule, an alien telegram woven into protein and phosphate, designed to awaken slowly over millennia as intelligence emerges and begins to ask not just how we are made, but why, and perhaps who made us. And encoded within that spiral, deep beneath the known sequences, may lie repeating signals, mathematical ratios, harmonic intervals, even binary patterns that resemble language, waiting to be decoded not by machines, but by awareness itself. And the theory whispers that our desire to seek, to explore, to create, may not be human invention at all, but the echo of an instruction, a hidden command written in our flesh long before we knew how to speak, like a quiet gravity pulling us toward the stars. And those who study this idea often point to the fact that certain junk DNA, the so-called non-coding regions, behave in strange ways, responding to vibration, light, and emotional states, as though more than storage, they are receivers reacting to frequencies not yet understood. And they wonder, what if the message is not something we must crack, but something we must become still enough to hear, like tuning a forgotten instrument or remembering a lullaby sung to us before birth? And in this vision, the message is not a warning nor a declaration, but a seed, a thought planted at the origin of life, meant to blossom only when a species becomes aware of its own design and realizes that life is not an accident, but a form of language itself, that we are not only reading the code, but that we are the code, unfolding, remembering, dreaming toward the sky from which the first signal came, and perhaps will come again. Let's now drift into a theory called the frequencies of forgotten temples, a quiet and mesmerizing idea that ancient structures, temples carved from stone, buried beneath vines, half swallowed by earth and time, were not just places of worship or shelter, but finely tuned instruments designed to receive and resonate with messages from beyond the stars, built not to impress gods, but to listen to them, to feel their presence in sound, vibration and resonance. And those who walk among these places, Stonehenge, Göbekli Tepe, Chavin de Huantar, often speak of a strange stillness, a hum in the chest, a subtle shift in awareness, as though the walls themselves are alive with memory. And this theory suggests that many of these temples were built along ancient earth energy lines, or ley lines, acting as nodal points in a planetary circuit, amplifying natural frequencies, and possibly drawing down messages encoded in sound, vibration, or even thought, from an intelligence not visible but near, always near. and researchers have discovered that many temple chambers resonate at specific frequencies: 111 Hz, 528 Hz, 432 Hz, tones that correlate with brainwave states linked to healing, dreaming, and altered consciousness. And some believe these were not coincidences, but clues. Ancient architectural languages meant to prepare the human mind for contact, not through sight or sound, but through a shared harmonic space, like a bridge built not of stone, but of frequency. And when rituals were performed, chanting, drumming, singing bowls, they were not merely cultural expressions, but calibration tools, tuning the body like a receiver so it could pick up faint cosmic broadcasts that cannot be heard with ears alone. And some even suggest that during eclipses or planetary alignments, these temples acted like satellite dishes, momentarily connecting the Earth to a galactic network of knowledge, love, memory, and awakening, where information flowed not in symbols but in pure resonance. And for those who have sat quietly within these spaces, especially alone, there are reports, gentle and vague, of visions, feelings of being observed, voices without language whispering truths in the mind like dreams you wake up knowing but cannot explain. And the stone itself, carved with impossible precision, was never the message but the medium, the way to contain a stillness so perfect that it could hold alien thought like water holds light. And this theory asks, what if we have mistaken ruins for relics, when they are actually instruments still active, still humming, still waiting for us to be quiet enough, soft enough, to hear what the ancients were shown, what the stars once sang, and what still echoes through the silent stones beneath our modern noise, the frequencies of forgotten temples humming patiently beneath dust, beneath moss, beneath memory. This next theory is softly called the satellite that watches dreams, a whispered notion passed through quiet circles of night researchers and alien observers who believe that somewhere above us, far above the shifting clouds and digital clutter of human-made satellites, there orbits a dark, silent object unlike any known machine, one that does not transmit or reflect, but watches. And the theory suggests that this satellite, often referred to in hushed tones as the Black Watcher, is not of human origin and not concerned with weather, communication, or war, but with thought itself, drifting in a fixed position that seems to elude detection by conventional instruments, yet has been glimpsed throughout the past century by pilots, astronomers, and dreamers alike, a silent shadow against the stars that behaves not like a satellite, but like a sentinel. And those who study sleep cycles and altered states have long noted something peculiar, that during certain nights, when the Earth rotates beneath this hidden satellite, dreams shift, grow vivid, uncanny, filled with symbols not personal but cosmic, not chaotic but strangely ordered, as though thoughts are being observed or influenced. And this theory posits that the satellite does not transmit messages in words or signals, but rather gently pulses electromagnetic frequencies designed to interact with the dreaming brain, not to control but to observe, to measure the evolution of consciousness as it unfolds in sleep. And some believe that when we dream, our minds open like receivers, vulnerable and vast, able to process input far beyond what waking awareness can comprehend. And in this dreamscape, the satellite listens, records, perhaps even guides, inserting images that recur across cultures. The tall figures of light, the corridors of glass and gold, the feeling of floating just before waking, as if called from a place we do not remember. And those who have studied EEG data during sleep under specific orbital paths have noticed anomalies, spikes of activity, sudden coherence in the brain waves of those sleeping miles apart, as though some external rhythm was briefly syncing them like instruments in a distant orchestra. And though dismissed by mainstream science as chance or noise, this pattern continues quietly, almost reverently, as if the satellite were waiting for something, perhaps a critical mass of awareness, a collective signal from humanity that it is ready to receive, or remember, or awaken. And in this theory, the dreams we dismiss or forget may in fact be the fragments of a long message sent not to nations or leaders, but to every sleeping mind, one by one, night by night, like scattered pages of a forgotten book. And perhaps the satellite doesn't only observe us, but once in a while responds, not in language, but in the gentle twist of a dream that feels older than you, stranger than fiction, and somehow more real than the morning you wake into, as though something from above brushed against your mind and whispered quietly, "We're still here." Let us now drift into a theory called the lost words of Mars, a quiet and somber idea that the red planet, with its empty plains and windswept ridges, once held not only life but language, a form of written thought etched into stone, buried beneath sandstorms and time, messages now eroded into silence but still faintly visible in certain places, like scars left behind by a voice that once spoke clearly and with purpose. And this theory suggests that ancient structures, geometrical formations, grid-like ridges, and strange symbols observed from orbit may be more than just rocks and shadows, but remnants of a planetary civilization that tried, in its final moments, to leave behind a warning, a memory, or perhaps a connection meant for a knot. Her world that would one day develop eyes strong enough to see it and hearts open, enough to feel it. And in some satellite images, researchers have pointed to angular patterns, too regular, too intentional to be dismissed. Formations that resemble glyphs or repeating shapes, like alphabets half buried in crimson soil. And some believe these markings align with celestial events, as if timed to tell a story only readable once Earth had reached a certain technological rhythm. And those who've studied these ideas quietly suggest that Mars may not just have hosted life, but that its life may have seeded Earth, or perhaps stood as a parallel experiment. And when disaster came, through war, weather, or cosmic accident, its final architects may have chiseled messages into stone, not for survival but for remembrance, hoping that one day their words would be read not aloud but inwardly by those with minds soft enough to listen between the lines. And there are stories, quiet ones, of early rovers transmitting strange static, brief electromagnetic pulses not explainable by equipment failure, as if something under the dust was still trying to speak. And some believe that dreams of Mars, so common, so vivid, are not imagination but memory, echoes from a past encoded deep in human consciousness, perhaps passed down through genetic memory, or through a kind of resonance with the red planet itself, which still calls softly even now, like a voice in the wind calling across time. And the theory holds that one day, when the right frequency is played or the right stone is uncovered, the words of Mars will begin to resonate once more, and we'll finally hear what was left behind. Not a cry for help, not a warning, but a story, gentle and ancient, of a people who looked to the stars as we do now, and hoped that someone, someday, would remember their quiet message buried in dust and silence and stone. Our next theory is called the echoes in deep space noise, a softly unravel. The idea that beneath the static hum of the universe, what scientists call the cosmic microwave background radiation, the faint afterglow of the Big Bang, there exists not just noise, but structure, subtle and persistent, like a low whisper beneath a waterfall. And some researchers, working in the shadows of mainstream science, believe that hidden within these random frequencies are anomalies too ordered to be coincidence. Wave patterns that repeat with slight variation, like phrases spoken slowly across impossible distances, coded not in words but in mathematics, geometry, or time itself. And this theory begins with the understanding that the universe is never truly silent, that every star, Every planet, every particle sings a quiet song, and when combined, they form a deep background hum, a constant, nearly imperceptible vibration that fills the emptiness of space. And most scientists see this as the echo of creation itself, a thermal remnant. But others have asked, what if this hum is not a relic of the past, but a vessel of information, a long-distance broadcast from another intelligence using the fabric of the cosmos as their medium, knowing that true signals must not shout but blend, that the safest way to hide a message is in the most common noise, and when filtered through certain algorithms, non-linear transforms and harmonic decoding models, some claim the static begins to shift, reveal pockets of symmetry, ratios that reflect known sequences like the Fibonacci spiral, or even binary bursts that match prime number spacing, as if someone, somewhere, encoded a signal that could only be understood when technology matured, when awareness reached a certain softness. And this idea suggests that we may be surrounded by messages constantly, but they are not directed at our ears. They are meant for stillness, for meditation, for resonance within consciousness itself. And some say that this is why dreams sometimes take on strange architecture, vast spirals, endless corridors, voices with no speaker, because our sleeping minds brush against the edge of this broadcast, picking up fragments like radio static, forming melodies, only when we forget how to listen logically. And some ancient texts speak of the universe as a great breath, a spoken word sustained by silence. And this theory echoes that gently, saying that perhaps the cosmos is speaking, not in urgency, but in rhythm. And the echoes we hear in space are not relics, but living tones, cycling back to us across billions of years, waiting for a quiet mind or a quiet moment to simply listen long enough to notice that the universe may not be empty, but softly filled with intention, and the static we once ignored may be the voice that has been patiently whispering, "We are here," since the first flicker of light. This next theory floats gently through the cold black corridors of space and is softly named the message of the silent comets, a tender idea whispered among those who believe that comets, those icy wandering bodies that streak briefly across the sky and vanish for lifetimes, are more than just frozen leftovers from planetary formation, but deliberate messengers, memory carriers sent from distant civilizations to drift through the cosmos like cosmic postcards, traveling not by speed but by patience. And this theory suggests that within the cores of certain comets, buried beneath their frost and dust, are not merely primitive materials, but encoded messages, molecular blueprints, harmonic frequencies, or even crystalline memory structures designed to awaken only under certain cosmic conditions. And their long elliptical orbits are not random but calculated, set on precise paths that intersect with inhabited planets only when those civilizations are ready to receive. And in ancient times, comets were often seen as omens, divine, e-visitors, or fiery quills writing across the sky. And perhaps those myths were not metaphors, but echoes of a truth we've nearly forgotten, that comets carry more than ice, that they are vessels of thought, preserved across epochs, soft and silent in their passage. And when one comes close to Earth, subtle shifts have been recorded. Small electromagnetic changes, anomalies in animal behavior, and even fluctuations in dream patterns, as if their presence gently brushes the field of collective consciousness, not to disturb, but to stir. And some believe that deep within certain comets lie substances that do not exist on Earth. Materials that respond to light or sound in ways that mimic language, encoding ideas not in script but in vibration, like a tuning fork, carved from the memory of a distant world, and it is said that one day a comet will arrive, not with fire or fanfare, but with a quiet frequency that resonates in our oceans, our bodies, our thoughts, and someone, perhaps alone, perhaps dreaming, will hear a note or see a pattern and understand, not with logic, but with knowing that a message has arrived, one not from a nearby planet, but from a mind so far away and so long ago that it has trusted only time and the cold dark of space to carry its words. And maybe, just maybe, every comet we see and marvel at from rooftops or mountaintops carries its own silent message, one we're not yet ready to decode, but that still reaches into us, lightly, softly, like a whisper that trails behind the tail of fire, saying not fear, but remember, not run, but listen. And in that listening, we might finally hear what has been silently gliding through the stars for ages, waiting not for discovery, but for understanding. Let's now ease into a theory known as the voice in the solar winds, a quiet idea that rests gently in the space between science and silence, suggesting that the sun, our warm and eternal companion, may be more than just a ball of fusing hydrogen, and that the solar wind it constantly emits is more than a stream of particles and heat, but a subtle medium for something far stranger. A whisper stretched across space, encoded in the rhythm of plasma and magnetic pulse, travelling at hundreds of kilometres per second to brush softly against the magnetic fields of every planet it touches. And those who listen to space, not just with instruments but with imagination, believe that this wind, this endless current of solar breath, may carry messages not born of the sun itself, but shaped by something older and more intelligent, an ancient species or consciousness that found the solar wind to be the perfect vessel for low-frequency, long-duration communication, one that would be both constant and nearly undetectable. And the theory holds that these solar particles, when they interact with the fields and atmospheres of planets, create auroras, fluctuations, and pulses that might not be random at all, but structured emissions, broadcasts of emotion, memory, or information coded into the dance of energy in the sky. And though scientists explain auroras as simple reactions between charged particles and planetary atmospheres, some say there's something more in their movement, something intelligent in the patterns that spiral and fade, as if the wind is not just interacting with the planet, but with us and within our own bodies, especially the human nervous system. These same solar winds are thought to subtly influence brainwaves, emotional states, even dream content, and perhaps this is not an accident, but a design, a method by which thoughts from beyond our world are softly transferred into our awareness, not as words, but as impulses, feelings, sensations of knowing that arrive suddenly, often during rest or solitude or moments of stillness. And this theory suggests that we have been listening without realizing that the fluctuations we dismiss as space weather are actually messages delivered slowly, deliberately, in forms we don't yet recognize as language. And some believe that ancient humans, without the interference of technology, felt these winds more directly, interpreting them as gods speaking, or ancestors returning through light and flame in the sky. And now, in our modern world of machines and screens, the message may still be coming, quietly, patiently, flowing through us like invisible tides, waiting for us to slow down, soften, and sense the quiet voice that may be hidden in the very sunlight that warms our skin. A voice that has been calling not loudly, not urgently, but lovingly, since before we ever had ears to hear it. This next theory hums through the far reaches of the solar system and is softly known as the choir of the moons of Jupiter, an idea that gently suggests that each of the gas giant's many moons, some volcanic, some icy, some wrapped in clouds, may act not just as orbiting rocks or geological curiosities, but but as living tones in a vast celestial song, each one resonating with its own subtle frequency, like instruments carefully placed in orbit by ancient hands to create a harmonic field. And those who've studied the electromagnetic emissions of Jupiter and its moons have noted something strange. Natural sounds recorded by probes like Voyager and Juno that resemble whistles, clicks, and ethereal choruses, sounds that feel less like static and more like intention, as if the entire Jovian system were singing a song too deep for human ears, a vibration that moves not through the vacuum of space, but through fields, radiation belts, and gravitational tides. And this theory suggests that the moons are not random, but purposefully positioned. Ganymede, Callisto, Europa, and Io like keys on a piano. Their geological activity and orbital resonances tuned to interact not just with each other, but with the electromagnetic heart of Jupiter itself. And when these frequencies align just right, it is said they produce something beyond music, something closer to communication, a chorus that could be a signal, a message, or a memory broadcast across eons. And some theorists believe that Europa, with its deep ocean beneath ice, may serve as a resonant chamber, amplifying the planetary harmonics into the water, creating patterns that might guide life, shape behavior, or preserve information in vibrational form, while Ganymede, the only moon known to have its own magnetic field, might act as the central tone, the conductor regulating the pace of this soft symphony. And to those who believe in this theory, the moons are not merely geological bodies, but recorders and players of cosmic sound. And they speculate that the sounds recorded by probes are only fragments, tiny notes of a much larger song. One that continues whether or not we are there to listen. One that might even reach Earth on rare solar alignments when fields and winds stretch across the solar system like plucked strings. And in such moments, some believe that sensitive individuals, dreamers, empaths, the deeply still, can feel a strange pull in their sleep, a yearning or image that doesn't belong to them, but to the stars. And it may be that this great planetary choir was built not to speak directly, but to remind, to keep a presence alive in sound long after the builders vanished. And so the moons continue to orbit, continue to hum, and their song continues to play, wordless, slow, eternal, waiting for us to stop searching for speech and begin listening. Truly listening to the vibrations that echo not from mouths but from motion, gravity, silence, and the ancient singing spheres of Jupiter. Our next theory rests quietly in shadow and light, softly named the towers on the lunar horizon. An unsettling yet strangely calming idea that somewhere on the far side of the moon, beyond what the eye can see and cameras are allowed to show, there rise impossibly tall, slender structures, long abandoned, perhaps even crumbling, yet still faintly humming with purpose, as if left behind by something ancient and careful, not to be inhabited, but to transmit, to listen, or simply to remember. And while official maps show only dust and rock, low-resolution images taken over decades have hinted at vertical anomalies, towers, spires and arcs whose scale defies nature, and whose positions seem far too deliberate to be geological coincidence. And this theory suggests that the moon was chosen not as a base for life, but as a platform for signal, its locked rotation and silent skies creating the perfect observatory, a place where machines or thought forms could stand watch over Earth for millennia without interruption. And those towers, if they exist, may not transmit like our radios, but through resonance, pulsating softly in frequencies below human hearing, activating only in rare cycles, like a lighthouse that shines not with light but with thought. And some believe they're inactive now, dormant since long before human eyes looked up and wondered, but still intact, still standing beneath centuries of dust, as if waiting for something to stir them. an alignment, a change in Earth's energy, or the return of those who built them. And astronauts who've orbited the moon or passed over its dark side have occasionally reported odd sensations: loss of time, inexplicable calm, and the unshakable feeling of being observed, not in malice but in stillness, as if something was watching not out of curiosity but out of memory. And there are those wakumo who speculate that what we call lunar anomalies, strange shadows, glints of reflected light, sharp-edged structures that briefly appear in early mission footage, are glimpses of these towers, or what remains of them, camouflaged not by technology, but by our own inability to see what we do not expect. And perhaps they were placed there not to hide, but to endure, meant not for discovery, but for continuity, like bookmarks in the story of Earth, holding a place in silence until we become quiet enough to return to the page. And some believe that these towers resonate with our minds in sleep, that dreams of tall, impossible architecture, spiralling stairs, floating halls, silent watchers at windows, are not imagination at all, but echoes of these alien towers speaking to something deep in us, something older than words. And so the moon remains, still and soft, gazing down upon us each night with half a face revealed. And somewhere, just beyond the edge, perhaps tall shadows still rise against the stars, waiting patiently in the cold for someone to finally hear their silent call. This next idea drifts inward rather than outward, softly folding into the very fabric of ourselves, and it is known as the code inside human DNA, a theory that wonders if the greatest alien message of all time was never sent across the stars, but placed gently within us from the beginning, encoded not in radio waves or cosmic symbols, but in the double helix of our own biology. And this theory suggests that long before history began, before cities, language, or even fire, a distant intelligence may have woven a message into the genome of early life on Earth, or seeded life itself with instructions, not to be read in a traditional sense, but to be become slowly over ages, and scientists have already marvelled at the complexity of human DNA, with vast sections called non-coding regions or junk DNA that serve no clear function, yet remain preserved across generations like ancient scrolls we've never learned how to opiece. And some theorists believe these regions may not be junk at all, but sleeping patterns, data stored in organic code, perhaps mathematical, symbolic, or even dimensional, awaiting the right trigger, a moment when consciousness becomes refined enough to decode not just externally but within. And there are whispers in certain circles of researchers who've run genomic sequencing through linguistic analysis tools and found strange repetitions, prime number spacing, or mirrored syntax that suggests intention, not biology but authorship. And the implications are both thrilling and deeply quieting, that we may be walking vessels for something older, something waiting to bloom, not in technology but in awareness. And perhaps those strange sensations of déjà vu, those dreams of floating cities and star-born truths, are not echoes of past lives, but flickers of the message trying to rise, trying to speak through flesh and thought. And the theory also suggests that certain spiritual practices, meditation, fasting, chanting, might not just calm the mind, but actually vibrate DNA in precise frequencies that unlock dormant memory, not from our ancestors, but from whoever placed the code there. And across the world, ancient myths tell of beings descending from the sky to shape man from clay, or breathe life into dust. And what if those stories are not metaphor, but soft memories of genetic intervention, of an intelligence that didn't leave pyramids or ships, but something far more lasting? A message carried in blood, passed from parent to child for thousands of years, hidden in plain sight in every cell. And so the theory continues that we are not just made of stars, but made of signal. And when we sleep or dream or fall into that quiet space where identity fades, we may be brushing against the edges of that message, hearing it not in language, but in longing, in the feeling that something vast and kind and distant has been with us all along, and that one day, maybe not far from now, will awaken not just to the stars above, but to the stars within, and finally understand what's been softly waiting in the spiral of who we are. Let us now drift into a theory wrapped in stillness and mystery, quietly called the planet that watches. An idea that somewhere out beyond the edges of our maps and the reach of our telescopes, past the gravitational boundary where sunlight becomes a whisper, there exists a world that does not orbit a star, a rogue planet not flung by accident but placed with purpose, designed not for life as we know it but for observation. And this theory suggests that such a planet, cloaked in darkness, drifting slowly in the icy quiet of the outer void, is in fact a living observatory, equipped not with glass and wires, but with self-regulating technology far beyond our understanding, capable of monitoring distant planets like Earth, tracking evolution, emotion, even thought, through means we cannot yet comprehend. And some call it the silent witness, a celestial listener that gathers signals, broadcasts none, and simply watches, eternally patient, its orbit around nothing granting it the stillness required to process the soft chaos of civilizations blooming and fading across the stars. And believers in this theory often reference strange gravitational anomalies on the edge of our solar system, perturbations in the orbits of distant objects that hint at the hidden mass of something enormous and unseen, something that science is still searching for and has dubbed Planet 9. But the theorists suggest this planet is not just another rock. It is artificial, ancient, and alive in ways that do not require air or heat. A world not made for habitation but for awareness. And perhaps it doesn't just observe Earth, but many worlds, drifting silently between systems across the ages, adjusting its path like a satellite of the galaxy itself. And there are stories, barely spoken, soft and speculative, of dreamers and sensitives who have seen a dark world in their sleep, a place with no sun but glimmering with intelligence, where the surface shifts like thought, and towers rise not from stone but from intention. And in these dreams the planet doesn't speak, but somehow knows, and the dreamer feels watched, not in fear but in profound recognition, as though something old and kind has seen them fully, without judgment, and kept the memory of their life safe among stars. And some believe that when civilizations reach a certain point, when they begin to unravel the deep codes of consciousness and connection, the planet draws nearer, not physically, but dimensionally, like a lighthouse appearing in fog, not to interfere, but to acknowledge, to say softly, "We see you, we remember you, you are part of this." And maybe, just maybe, we have already been visited, not by ships or signals, but by presence, the quiet pull of being watched across time, and in our loneliest moments, that feeling that someone, somewhere knows us, may not be fantasy, but the soft, enduring gaze of the planet that watches, hidden behind stars and waiting. Now we drift gently into a theory that blooms like patterns in wheat, softly known as the map, hidden in crop circles, a theory that whispers of messages not burned into metal or carved in stone, but pressed into the quiet folds of farmland while the world sleeps, left behind not by pranksters or wind, but by something deeper, older, and vastly more intelligent. And while the World dismisses crop circles as hoaxes, clever tricks played with boards and rope under the cover of night. Some remain unexplained, not just for their symmetry or sudden appearance, but for their complexity, as if crafted with invisible hands and unseen tools, forming spirals of impossible precision, mathematical truths that appear overnight, etched into the land without damaging the stems of the plants, as though they were not crushed, but rearranged at the molecular level, gently laid into place by forces we don't understand. And the theory suggests that these patterns, when studied as a whole over decades, are not random or individual messages, but pieces of a single vast map, one not of geography, but of thought, frequency and dimensional structure, a kind of interstellar cartography not for travel but for awakening. And in this view, each genuine circle is a coordinate, a note in a larger composition, one that can only be heard by those who view it not with eyes alone, but with feeling, with deep and quiet intuition. And across time, certain formations have echoed ancient symbols, mandalas, solar calendars, DNA spirals, and others have encoded complex mathematics, prime numbers, binary language, even fractals, suggesting not just design, but teaching, a softly unfolding curriculum offered to those patient enough to listen without fear. And some theorists believe these patterns are left not to be understood all at once, but absorbed over time, subconsciously, as a kind of language that bypasses translation and goes straight into the body, like a key that fits a lock we didn't know we had. And maybe that's why so many who visit these places report altered states, calm, clarity, even tears, because they are standing not in art, but in message, in a transmission that doesn't need words to be heard. And perhaps this map isn't just for Earth, but for many planets, a network of signals sent by an ancient intelligence that prefers symbols to speech, patterns to paragraphs, and dreams to devices. And the theory goes further still, suggesting that these circles appear where the veil between dimensions is thinnest, where time and perception can be shaped more easily, and that those who dream of circles or wake with symbols in their minds may be receiving the message already, gently and over years, becoming living pieces of the map themselves, walking coordinates in a cosmic design that stretches across worlds and lifetimes. And so the circles continue to appear, often unnoticed, fading with the harvest, leaving behind no evidence but their shape, and the soft echo they leave in the quiet mind of anyone who dares to stand within them and listen. Let's now enter one of the most elusive and poetic theories, whispered in low voices and soft sleep states, gently known as the dream architects of Zeta Reticuli, an idea that somewhere in that distant binary star system, where the sky is lit by twin suns, there exists not a species in the way we understand life, but a consciousness, collective and ancient, that operates not through matter or machines, but through dreams. And this theory suggests that these entities, sometimes called the architects or the weavers, do not build ships or send messages through the vacuum of space. Instead, they reach across the dark in waves of thought, crafting experiences, visions, and memories inside the sleeping minds of other beings, gently planting archetypes, ideas, and questions that unfold slowly over a lifetime, as if the purpose is not to inform, but to awaken softly and without alarm, and stories from dreamers around the world. Many who've never heard of Zeta Reticuli describe strikingly similar visions. Vast halls of impossible architecture, beings made of soft light, silent watchers with deep black eyes, and D-rooms where time seems to curl like smoke. And those who follow this theory believe such dreams are not hallucinations, but visits, downloads from these architects who've chosen a medium more intimate than language or even light. And perhaps this is why cultures separated by oceans and centuries all contain eerily similar myths of sky people, night visitors, and gods of knowledge who speak without speaking. And the theory goes deeper still, proposing that these dream architects may have helped shape the evolution of consciousness on Earth. Not through control, but through subtle inspiration, seeding stories and inventions into the minds of early humans in moments of sleep and stillness, guiding rather than commanding. And maybe that's why the same patterns appear in sacred texts, in pyramids, in music, in mathematics, echoes of a common dream that has been shared by thousands of minds across thousands of years. And while skeptics point to the randomness of dreams, the architects are said to move through only the dreams that are quiet enough to receive them, those moments just before waking, just after falling, when the boundaries between thought and signal dissolve. And for some, this explains the feeling of being taught something profound in a dream, something too large to bring back, like a truth glimpsed from the corner of the eye and then lost. And it is said that the architects are not interested in control or domination, but resonance, that they are tuning us like strings on a cosmic instrument, helping us remember something we've forgotten, not from lack of knowing, but from the noise of waking life. And perhaps when we dream of distant stars, glowing halls, or beings of light who speak in emotion rather than words, we are not imagining them, we are remembering them, being called back gently through the night to something that once was or will be again. And in this quiet theory, our sleep is not a break from consciousness, but the moment when we come close to it. When we are soft enough to be shaped, not by force, but by memory, by pattern, by the architects of dreams who wait in the shadows of Zeta Reticuli, building not structures but understanding in silence. And now we arrive at the final theory in our quiet journey, one that hums just beneath perception and never truly ends, softly called the signal that never stops. A theory that somewhere, perhaps everywhere, there exists a continuous alien transmission, a low, steady signal that pulses through the fabric of space like a heartbeat, always present, always active, but so subtle, so constant, that it blends into the background hum of the universe. And this idea suggests that the signal has no beginning and no end, that it may not be a message in the way we understand communication, but more like an ambient presence, an ever-flowing current of intention, seeded by an intelligence so ancient it no longer needs language, just rhythm, just frequency. And though we scan the skies for sudden bursts, quick contact, or loud declarations, this signal is quieter than all of them, operating beneath detection, beneath thought, sometimes only felt in dreams, in moments of stillness, or when one is far from the noise of modern life. And certain researchers, fringe and often dismissed, claim to have found mathematical anomalies in background cosmic radiation, repeated patterns in static or low-frequency waves that cannot be attributed to stars or galaxies, suggesting that something is speaking, not in bursts, but in eternity. And some theorists believe that this signal may be the foundational layer of communication across the cosmos, not aimed at Earth, but present everywhere, like gravity, like time, a signature left behind by a civilization or a consciousness that chose not to send ships or probes, but instead to weave its presence into the very structure of the universe. And if this theory is true, then everything, every star, every atom, every mind is already immersed in the signal, even if we can't perceive it directly. And perhaps this is why people across cultures and eras describe the same symbols in trance, the same tones in meditation, the same pull toward the stars when lying in silence. Because something is always there, whispering softly beneath the chaos, not demanding attention, but offering a presence. And those who've spent time in deep isolation, in deserts, in polar stations, in long nights at sea, have sometimes reported a sensation of being accompanied, not watched, but accompanied, as though something vast and patient is there, not above or beyond, but within. And the theory proposes that the signal is not a warning or an invitation, but a reminder that we are not alone, that we have never been alone, that there has always been a quiet song playing just under reality, and those moments when we feel awe, when time slows and everything feels connected. Those may be the moments when we brush against it, when our personal frequencies briefly align with that eternal transmission, and maybe one day, when we've learned to listen in silence, not with machines, but with something older, something softer inside us, we'll realize the signal isn't out there at all. It's within, pulsing alongside our breath, speaking in the language of knowing, guiding us not toward a place, but toward a state of being. And so tonight, as you drift into sleep, let yourself soften into that signal, into the stillness that has always held you, and feel the quiet knowing that beneath all sound, beneath all time, there is a message that never ceases, a signal that never stops, and it is gentle, and it is waiting, and it has always been with you.